My dad used my daughter's college fund to buy himself a jet ski. When she cried, he said, "Life's not fair, princess." I calmed her down, and that same day we left their house for good. By morning, a letter from my lawyer was already on its way, and then Dad got the real news. I don't really remember what my dad said first. Just the moment my daughter's face fell when he walked in wearing that ridiculous red life vest, dragging a jet ski keychain in his hand like it was a trophy. She was sitting at the kitchen table doing a worksheet from one of those college prep books I got her at Goodwill. She'd been filling out practice essays all week, trying to stay focused, trying to believe the future was still intact even though everything else had washed away. 3 weeks earlier we lost our house in the flood. Not just the roof and drywall but everything that made it home. Her childhood drawings framed on the hallway walls. My husband's old guitar, the one he left behind when cancer took him. Gone. We didn't even have time to grab a change of clothes. My daughter kept asking if the box of letters she wrote to her dad was still floating somewhere out there. I never answered. With nowhere else to go, we moved in with my parents. At first it felt like a blessing. A bed. A roof. Hot water. But the second week in, the dynamic shifted. My mother started leaving lists on the counter. Chores, meal prep, grocery contributions. I was working part-time at a diner just to cover gas and lunch money, but nothing I did was enough. She'd sigh dramatically every time my daughter poured a glass of milk. Dad would mention how much electricity 2 more people added to the bill. One night, I overheard them in the hallway saying we were freeloading. They didn't know I was awake. But we stayed. Because I didn't have another choice. I told myself it was temporary, that I could endure it, that it would all be worth it once we got back on our feet. I held on to the idea of my daughter going to college, using the $15,000 I'd saved for her over the years. Birthdays, tax refunds, side jobs. Every dollar I didn't spend on food or rent, I put into that account. It was my promise to her. That promise shattered the morning my dad strutted in like a teenager with a new toy. He started talking about lake weekends, how he got a killer deal, how you only live once. He held out the key and said, "Wanna see it?" Thought he was joking. But then my mom chimed in. Said, "Well, it's not like that money was doing any good just sitting there." My stomach dropped. I asked them what money. She looked at me like I was slow. The money. The college fund. They'd taken it. Without asking. All of it. My dad said they deserved it after housing us for free for over a month. That we'd racked up costs. That meals, showers, and laundry weren't charity. He actually said, "You two should be thanking us." Then he laughed and told my daughter, "Life's not fair, princess." She looked like someone had slapped her. She'd worked so hard. She'd given up everything without a single complaint. I watched her try to stay composed, but when the tears came, I didn't stop her. I just walked over, took her hand, and led her upstairs. We packed everything we had, 2 duffel bags and 1 plastic tub filled with the waterlogged remains of our life. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't explain. I just texted the one person I never thought I'd turn to again. My older brother. We hadn't spoken in years. He'd cut off contact with our parents after some blowout I was never allowed to ask about. I always thought he was being dramatic, but now I understood. He replied within minutes. Said one word. Come. We were at his doorstep by midnight. He opened the door before I even knocked. My daughter ran into his arms like she'd known him her whole life. He made up a bed for her, gave me coffee, and didn't ask a single question until morning. Then he asked how much they took. When I told him, he nodded once and said, "I know a guy." That afternoon, a formal letter from his lawyer was sent to my parents. By the next morning, they were about to find out that the jet ski wasn't the only thing that came with a price. By the time my mom called me, the letter had already been delivered. She didn't bother with a greeting. She just launched into a tirade about how I had humiliated the family, how I was twisting things, how involving a lawyer over something she called a minor misunderstanding made me vindictive. I held the phone away from my ear until she paused long enough to breathe. Then I said only one thing. "You stole from your granddaughter." There was this moment where everything on her end went silent, like the line had frozen. And then she hung up. My brother was in the kitchen drinking coffee when I set my phone on the counter. He didn't ask what she said. He just slid a folder toward me. Inside were copies of the paperwork Beth, his lawyer, had already filed. I stared at the pages, stunned by how official it all felt. Unauthorized withdrawal. Fraudulent representation. Damages. Words I'd never imagined using against my own parents. Beth wasn't the warm type. She never softened her tone for the sake of comfort. So when I asked her whether there was any real chance of getting everything back, she didn't sugarcoat it. She said, "You're getting the 15. And after what they pulled at the bank, you'll probably get 10 more. I hadn't expected that. I'd only hoped for the original amount, nothing extra. Hearing her say it so confidently made something unlock inside me, something I didn't realize I'd been holding tight for weeks. That afternoon, my daughter played with my nephews in the living room while my brother's wife, Lacey, helped her make bracelets out of bright plastic beads. The sound of kids laughing drifted through the house in a way that felt foreign after everything at my parents' place. My daughter kept glancing at me like she was waiting for someone to yell at her for having fun. I kept giving her these small nods, letting her know she didn't have to be afraid here. My parents didn't stay quiet for long. 2 days later, messages from my dad started appearing. Paragraphs demanding I stop the nonsense. Claims that I'd overreacted. Threats about ruining his reputation at the lake. And then, at the bottom, this line that made my brother let out a disbelieving laugh when I read it aloud. He said he'd press charges against me for stress. We ignored him. Instead, Beth filed the next set of documents. It wasn't aggressive. It was factual. A demand for the return of the entire amount plus damages. A payment deadline. Notification that if they failed to comply, we would move forward. That night, as if on cue, my mom pulled up in my brother's driveway. She stepped out of the car holding a plate of banana bread like it was some peace treaty carved into baked goods. She didn't knock. She rang the doorbell 5 times, fast and frantic. My brother answered. I stayed in the hallway out of sight. From the window, I watched her talk with that forced smile she reserved for strangers she wanted to impress. She held out the plate. He barely glanced at it. He just shook his head and said something short. She stood there frozen for a moment before turning and walking back to her car slower than she'd arrived. Hours later, when everything was quiet, my daughter asked if we'd ever live with Grandma and Grandpa again. I told her the truth. No, we won't. She nodded and went back to arranging her dolls. She didn't ask why. I waited until she fell asleep before I let myself cry. The next morning, Beth called with an update. My parents had hired a lawyer. He'd sent a letter requesting a compromise. They offered to return $5,000 and insisted I sign a non-disclosure agreement so no one else in the family would hear about any of it. It was insulting, desperate, and pointless. My brother listened to Beth read the offer aloud and shook his head. Not a chance. We sent no response. Not even a rejection. Because the next phase wasn't about settling quietly. It was about forcing the truth into the light whether they wanted it or not. It started slow. First, it was just a couple of missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Then came a voicemail from my cousin Melissa, who I hadn't talked to since her baby shower 2 years ago. Her voice was hesitant, like she didn't know what she was allowed to say. She said my mom had called her trying to clarify things before rumors spread. Melissa wanted to know if it was true that I was suing them. I didn't answer her message. I didn't need to. That afternoon, Beth filed a motion requesting bank surveillance footage and a transcript of the call my parents claimed they made to authorize the withdrawal. She already knew what she'd find. Nothing. There was no permission, no record of consent. My parents had walked into the bank, spoken with someone they knew personally, and lied. And now the bank was starting to sweat too. My brother's lawyer warned us things would get messier before they got better. And they did. 3 days after the motion was filed, my dad showed up at my brother's workplace. Just walked in like it was casual, like they hadn't spoken in 5 years. He asked to speak to him privately. My brother told the receptionist to call security. He never got near him. But that same night, my dad posted a long, dramatic message on Facebook. Something about betrayal, about how certain family members had chosen greed over love. He hinted that I was brainwashed, that I'd let money come between us. Then he wrote that he'd always tried to help his children, even when they didn't deserve it. People started commenting. Family members, old church friends, some neighbor I barely remembered. Most of them didn't know what was going on, but they'd read the post and assumed the worst. A few messaged me privately to get my side. I ignored them. The only person I responded to was my Aunt Laura. She sent a one-line message. Tell me what happened. I won't judge. So I told her. All of it. She didn't write back right away. But later that evening she commented on my dad's post. Just 2 words. You lied. It blew up from there. My mom made her own post the next morning. A long defensive rant about how they'd sacrificed everything for me and my daughter, and that we'd taken advantage of their kindness. She framed the stolen college fund as a reimbursement, and called the lawsuit an attack on family values. I didn't say a word publicly. I didn't have to. Beth called me that afternoon. Her voice was sharper than usual. She told me the bank had responded to the motion faster than expected. And it was worse than she thought. The manager who'd authorized the withdrawal was a friend of my dad's. The entire transaction had been pushed through without the standard checks, based solely on the manager's word that my dad was allowed. They bypassed 2 verification steps, no documentation, no recorded permission. Nothing. Beth was furious. Said it had opened up something much bigger. Said the bank itself might be liable now. And that's when things turned. The next day their lawyer reached out again, this time with a completely different tone. No more negotiation, no smug conditions. Just a brief note asking if we'd be willing to discuss a full repayment and possible damages in exchange for mutual NDA. Beth said no. She told them we'd see them in court. And then she called in a press contact. I didn't know this at the time, but my brother had a friend who worked for a local news outlet. The kind of stories they loved were ones about regular people being taken advantage of, especially when a respected local bank was involved. 2 days later, a story went up online. Daughter loses home in flood, then parents use her child's college fund to buy jet ski. My name wasn't in it. Neither was my daughter's. But the details were obvious enough that half the town knew who it was about. I got a message from my old boss, then my high school history teacher, then a neighbor from 3 houses down when I was 13. I didn't read the comments, but I saw the view count. 10,000 in the first 12 hours. That night my parents didn't post anything. They didn't call. They didn't show up. And for the first time since this started, the silence felt like progress. The silence didn't last. 3 mornings after the article went viral, Beth called me with news. The bank had offered a settlement. It wasn't just about my money anymore. Turns out the employee who approved the withdrawal had been part of a handful of exceptions made over the years, mostly for older clients or people with connections. The problem was, none of those exceptions had ever been audited. Till now. My dad had triggered something much bigger than he realized. Beth read the numbers over the phone. The full $15,000 refunded immediately. An additional $10,000 in damages from the bank directly. And another internal review that might lead to action against the manager involved. It was done. The money was coming back. Every last cent and more. But then something happened I didn't see coming. That same evening my dad was taken in for questioning. Not arrested, not yet. But someone from the bank had reported irregularities, and because he'd signed off on paperwork with false information, it wasn't just a civil matter anymore. It was financial misconduct. Fraud. And the worst part? He wasn't the only one. The manager, his friend, apparently had been letting things slide for years. My dad's withdrawal was just the first one someone had actually challenged. I found out through my brother, who got it from someone on the inside. They were looking at pressing criminal charges against both of them. When my mom found out, she showed up at my brother's house again. No banana bread this time. Just a pale face and a trembling voice asking if we could talk. My brother didn't let her in. He told her Beth would be in touch. But later that night something strange happened. I walked into the living room and found my daughter sitting on the floor with my brother's wife and the boys. She was teaching them a clapping game she used to play in 2nd grade, her face glowing like nothing bad had ever happened. She looked up at me and said, "This is what it feels like to have a real family." I couldn't speak. I walked out to the porch, sat down and just stared at the sky. My brother joined me a few minutes later, handed me a soda and said, "You know they're not going to bounce back from this, right?" I didn't answer. I wasn't sure what bouncing back even meant anymore. The next morning Beth confirmed everything. Settlement finalized. Money transferred. The bank had taken full liability. The manager was suspended pending investigation, and charges were likely coming for both him and my dad. Beth asked me if I wanted to sue my parents directly for emotional distress. I told her yes. I told her I wanted every word of what they did to exist in a file with my name on it. And that's when the visit started. At first it was just my mom. She'd drive past the house slowly. Once she left flowers at the mailbox like we were dead. Then my dad started showing up too. No more loud proclamations, no shouting, just waiting. Sitting in his car across the street like he didn't know what to do anymore. And then the weirdest thing happened. They started bringing food. Casseroles. Tupperware full of pasta. Store-bought cookies. They left them on the porch like offerings, never ringing the bell, never staying long enough to be seen. It was creepy. Like they were mourning something that wasn't even gone. My brother refused to touch any of it. I threw it all away. But the kids noticed. And then on my brother's birthday, everything came to a head. There was a small party. Just family and a couple of his coworkers. Lacey made cupcakes, the kids had balloons, and for once things felt normal. Until someone knocked. My brother opened the door. It was our parents. And they weren't holding food. They were holding each other's hands. They stepped inside, uninvited, walked past the guests and right in front of everyone dropped to their knees. My mom said she was sorry. My dad looked at me and said he hadn't realized how far he'd gone. The room went dead silent. And even though part of me wanted to scream, wanted to rage and throw every horrible thing they'd ever done back in their faces, I didn't. My brother looked at me. I nodded. He told them we forgave them. They started to cry. But deep down, we didn't. Not really. After that birthday night, after the tears and the public kneeling and the apology that landed like a stone instead of a bandage, something shifted. But not in the clean, redemptive way they probably imagined. My parents started acting like that moment had fixed everything. Like all it took to erase years of manipulation, guilt-tripping, and a $15,000 betrayal was a little humility on a living room rug. They didn't get it. The week after, my mom dropped off a box of board games she said she found in the attic. The ones you used to love. My daughter didn't recognize any of them. My dad sent an email with scholarship links and an article titled, 10 Things Every College-Bound Teen Should Know. He ended it with, "Hope this helps. Let me know if you need anything else." I didn't reply. They weren't evil people. That's the thing. That's what made it all harder. They were just selfish. The kind of people who saw their children's success as a reflection of their own greatness, and their children's suffering as something to be tallied against them like a debt. And no apology, not even on their knees, erased what they'd done. Meanwhile, my daughter was settling in like she'd always belonged there. He got a library card. Learned how to ride a bike with my nephew. Started journaling again. She was lighter. The tension she used to carry in her shoulders, that constant readiness to be corrected or dismissed, was gone. Lacey took her back to school shopping like it was the most normal thing in the world. She even called me from the fitting room to laugh about how my daughter had the exact same stubborn streak when it came to trying on jeans. I cried in the walk-in freezer during my shift at the diner that night. Just a few minutes, no drama. But it hit me, this was what it was supposed to feel like. Not perfect. Not easy. But real. Safe. Then a week later an envelope arrived. Handwritten. My dad's blocky, stiff lettering. 3 pages. No return address. No emotion, just explanations. He wrote that he understood what he did was wrong. That the money wasn't just money, and that he saw now how it had represented something far bigger. Security. Love. The future. He said he missed us. That the house was too quiet. That he'd already sold the jet ski to make things right. Enclosed was a cashier's check for $8,000. I stared at it for a long time. Not because I wanted it, but because I couldn't believe it existed. My dad, the same man who once said birthdays were for spoiled people, had gone to a bank, waited in line, and voluntarily given something up. I didn't cash it. I put it in a folder behind the court documents and bank statements and printouts from Beth. I wasn't sure what it meant yet. A few days after that they started showing up again. Not knocking. Just parking across the street. Sometimes together. Sometimes separately. Just sitting there in their car, engine running. Once they left a bag of groceries on the front porch. Another time, a tiny potted plant with a sticky note, for her desk. It was like they didn't know how to be people anymore. Like they were trying to act out some movie version of redemption, hoping if they hit the right marks we'd roll the credits and let them back in. We didn't. We were still living at my brother's and it was starting to show. Not in tension, there was none. But in space. The kids were beginning to overlap each other's routines. My daughter didn't complain, but I could tell she was craving something that was ours. Just ours. One night after dinner my brother and I sat on the back porch. He handed me a beer and said softly, "You need to start looking." I nodded. I'd known for a while. With the settlement money and what I'd managed to save, we had a shot. It wouldn't be big. It wouldn't be fancy. But it would be ours. And that meant something. Something real. We started small. Driving through neighborhoods on my days off, peeking at for sale signs, imagining what a room might look like with yellow curtains or a bookshelf by the window. My daughter had questions. Would we have a backyard? Could she paint her room? I didn't make promises, but I let her dream out loud. One day we passed a tiny white house with chipped siding and a crooked fence. It wasn't much. But she looked at it, then at me, and said, "That one looks like it wants us." I laughed. I didn't know if it would work out. But it was the first time in months I felt excited about something without fear biting at the edge. As for my parents, they kept orbiting us. Leaving messages. Small gifts. Once my mom sent a framed photo of me as a child standing in front of the old lake house. The back was scribbled with, "You were always so bright." That one stung. Because it reminded me how much brighter I might have been, if they'd only let me stay that way. I didn't respond. We were building something else now. Something quieter. Slower. And if they wanted forgiveness, they'd have to sit in the silence a little longer. We closed on the house the first week of October. It was smaller than I imagined, older too, but it had this strange, comforting feeling, like it had already survived things, like it understood what it meant to be rebuilt. The yard was uneven, the mailbox leaned to one side, and the kitchen tile was cracked straight through the middle. But my daughter stood in the empty living room, spun around once, and said, "This is ours." That's what made it real. We moved in with help from my brother and Lacey. Nothing dramatic. A borrowed truck, a few plastic bins, hand-me-down furniture. Lacey brought over groceries and my brother installed new locks without asking. No one said it out loud, but we all knew it was more than a move. It was a line in the sand. My parents found out 2 days later. They must have driven past the house, Maybe saw the porch light on or the sold sign gone. My mom called first. She left a message congratulating me, said she was glad we were moving forward. My dad didn't call. He showed up. He stood on the front step holding a cardboard box with a broken handle. Inside were photo albums. Mine from when I was a kid. Pictures I hadn't seen in years. Some from birthdays I barely remembered, others of me and my brother at the lake laughing mouths wide, unaware of the years that would come. He didn't ask to come in. He just said, "I thought you might want these." Then he left. I didn't open the box for a week. When I finally did, I found a letter tucked between two album pages. It was shorter this time. Less about excuses, more about time. He wrote that he couldn't undo what he'd done, but he was sorry he didn't protect me when I needed him most. That the money didn't even matter to him now. That watching my daughter cry had done something he couldn't shake. He ended it by saying, "I hope you'll let us be part of your lives again. But I understand if you won't." I didn't respond. A month passed. Then on my brother's birthday, exactly 1 year after the night we left my parents' house for good, we gathered again. A backyard barbecue. Balloons. Kids screaming over a new trampoline. Lacey made her famous ribs and someone brought a cake too big for the table. My daughter wore a dress with sunflowers and gave my brother a handmade card that said, "Thank you for giving us a home." And then they showed up. My parents. They walked through the side gate like they weren't sure whether they were allowed to be there. They didn't bring gifts or food or any of their usual performances. They walked into the center of the yard past everyone. And then, again they knelt. Right there in the grass. My mom said nothing at first. My dad looked straight at my brother and said, "You were right. About all of it." My mom said I didn't know how much I hurt her. Thought I was helping. No one moved. The kids fell quiet. My brother stood still for a second, then walked over, pulled them to their feet and said, "We forgive you." I stood behind him holding my daughter's hand. And I nodded. But inside, it wasn't forgiveness. Not really. It was closure. A quiet closing of a door that should have shut long ago. One that only stayed open because we were too afraid to walk away. Now we had. And they were left kneeling in the grass of someone else's yard, finally understanding what it felt like to lose something they thought they'd always own. We stayed until the sun went down. My daughter fell asleep in the car on the way home. And when I tucked her into bed that night, she whispered, "We're really okay now, right?" I said yes. And I meant it.